the thing that we don't do as a meat industry is we don't merchandise to different mouth behavior types, even though texture is, we've improved tenderness a lot in the last 30 years, but
Hello, meat folks. Welcome back to the MeatsPad podcast. It's your hungry and humble host, Phil Bass, back with another exceptional individual that you know what? I think this might be the first time we've had a Texas A&M representative on here, and so it's well overdue and it's time. Dr. Rhonda Miller, thanks for joining us today.
You are welcome, and I'm glad to be here representing Texas A&M.
How about that? All right. Well, so we had the you've been doing a lot of research on sensor evaluation, meat sensor evaluation especially, and that's what we want to talk about today, because you have taken a different approach to the traditional just flavor, tenderness, juiciness thing, and looking at the eating experience in a I would say a deeper perspective. And so I remember listening to a talk that you gave a little while ago on mouthfeel, and that's kind of where we are today. Is this is taken yet another step into that whole overall eating experience. So can you tell us a little bit about the science of mouthfeel that you're discovering?
I'd be more than happy to, Phil, and it's actually a pretty exciting area. As a traditional meat scientist, I've always looked at texture as for whole muscle products as muscle fiber tenderness, connective tissue, and overall tenderness. That's what I've reported in the literature and the research that I've published. And I've always known there was probably more to it. I didn't know what that was. I knew that in processed meats, we have hardness and springiness and particle size after chewing and all of these things. But when we tried that with whole muscle, it didn't seem to always relate. And I was at the research chefs meeting giving a talk on the beef flavor lexicon, and one of my former students, and they do say, you're successful when your students are smarter than you. And I would say that Jennifer Vahalik is smarter than me. And she was giving a talk on mouth behavior. She had these little sacks of candy. And I'm like, ooh, I want to go watch your talk. And our talks were at the same time. So we agreed that we'd meet after our talks and she'd tell me all about it. And Jennifer went and worked first as a sensory scientist for Nabisco, even though she came out of a meat science program, obviously did meat science research, ran my sensory lab for a few years. And so it gave her a little bit different perspective. And the person that she worked for eventually formed their own consulting company and asked Jennifer to join them. So they work with most of the big snack food companies and other companies as well. And they found when they were working with consumers that, first of all, consumers have a hard time expressing differences in texture. It's not as easy to talk about as flavor. They also found out that texture means different things to different people. Now, that's pretty interesting as far as I'm concerned. I'm like, oh, really? I mean, when we do consumer work, we measure texture like. We might ask tenderness, juiciness, questions. They usually coincide right with texture liking, using whatever scale. I use 9-point scales. And so I'm like, well, people seem to respond to texture very similar. And she said, no, they don't. And she introduced the concept of mouth behavior. And they have had over 3,000 people involved in a study that they did. There is one publication with this, but they're a company. They're not as interested in publishing. And they have narrowed it down to 4 types. That when people put food in their mouth, they either first bite and start breaking it down with the front teeth, or they do with the molars and start chewing. And then within those types, there are those people that bite down with their molars. They either chew really fast and swallow, or that chewing action is really what they want, or they chew it for a long time or a little bit longer, put it in the middle of their mouth and then swallow. And they discovered this especially with cereal. So think about cornflakes. Some people eat cornflakes right out of the box and they want it crunchy. Are you one of those, Phil?
I'm a crunchy kind of, yeah,
Okay.
I'm kind of a crunchy, yeah.
Yeah. And then the chewers will put milk on it and eat it pretty soon after they put milk on it. Crunchers, they don't let the milk stay on. If they're going to have milk with it, they're going to eat it right away before it gets soggy.
Sure, yeah.
But then other people put milk on it and wait for a while, and then they put it in their mouth and they actually suck the flavor out before they swallow. I know that, yeah. One of my former meat science students, who's now a professor at Chico, Crystal Waters, she is the fourth kind, the sucker. And those people, well, the smooshers take it and they take their tongue and roof of their mouth and they move it around and then they swallow. Suckers actually suck everything out of it before they swallow. So they found that with snack foods. And then they started looking at other foods and they said, whatever your mouth behavior, you apply to whatever foods you eat. And Jennifer, she gets paid the big bucks. Their company, UNI, they work with lots of different food products. And she said that, and it really relates even to how people purchase candy, purchase snack foods, purchase potato chips. Those people that like, the kettle cooked, yeah, those, if you do, you're a cruncher.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
And those, suckers buy Cheetos and suck the cheese flavor off of them. And they may not even eat the rest of the Cheeto if they do it soggy. Yeah. That Smushers take the Cheeto, put it in their mouth, and wait until it gets soggy, and then they move it around, and then yeah. And so Jennifer proposed the question. She said, I've always wanted to see how this relates to people when they eat meat, because Jennifer, having come out of my lab, had obviously measured lots of texture attributes of meat, and if it relates to preference. Because the other thing that they found was that words don't mean the same to different groups. So people who say it's chewy, if you're a chewer, that makes you happy, and you chew it and it's full, and then oh yeah. If it's chewy and you are a sucker, that means that it doesn't break down like you want it to. Okay, same piece of meat, they process it. And I got to thinking, we ask the same questions over and over and over again of our consumers, and they're giving us answers, but they probably don't mean what we think they mean for all of them. Yeah. And so texture's more than muscle fiber tenderness. So we did some work, and I'm going to tell you, first I was skeptical, but this was a lot of fun, right?
Well, I mean, that's the discovery process is, yeah. Let's go somewhere we've never been, right? Yeah.
So we started with hamburger patties, because we could manipulate the grind size, the fat level, and things like that. And Jennifer told me, she said, when I have the chewers in here, you're going to relate to them. When I have the crunchers in here, you're going to hear words that I, as a cruncher, like. And when we get the smushers in here and then the suckers, you're going to be surprised at how they respond to the same patties. I'm like, oh yeah, let's wait and see. So I was the meat server and I sat in on all these. And I want you to know, crunchers, since you're a cruncher, they first had to have a discussion about what's the best ice. And because yeah, I don't, And I found out that most people that are crunchers like Sonic Ice, which I never thought about before, and I'm like, well, that's good. But they talked about with passion. I mean, this wasn't like, I mean, it was a big deal. I'm like, oh my goodness, what's going on in their mind? And they ate the patties, and they also eat fast. They tend to be the fastest eaters. They swallow. Okay. They don't do what your mom told you to eat, chew your meat all the way.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Very true. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then when the chewers came, they like things a little bit different because they like to chew and they want it to break down. They don't want it to break down too fast. And Carrie Gehring is a chewer, and she likes top butt steaks because she could chew them longer. And she doesn't like tenderloins because they fall apart too fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Oh, wow.
see, the response to tenderness is different. And that's that we found that. And the things that are important to them, we found were different. When we got to suckers, juiciness was really important. They wanted to be able to taste it and if you have a piece of meat that they can't chew, they don't like to chew with their teeth, their back teeth. They like to chew with their front teeth, which as a chewer I don't relate to. But yeah, but that's good. And then the smushers, they like something that's softer because they want to take their tongue and smush it to their mouth. And you watch these people eat, they do it. They really do it. And UNI Corporation has a selection criteria based on a visual where you take this very simple test and it helps to categorize you. And so it is like I never thought about how I eat ice cream, and I ate some ice cream and I chew ice cream. And the people we were talking about some of this, and some of the chewers said, oh, I'm not unusual because I chew ice cream. And we also like little chunks of things in our ice cream. We don't like smooth ice cream. And yeah, chewers are the same way. They want to be able to eat something,
Yeah.
Yeah. And smushers, they like the soft serve.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And my daughter's a smusher, and she doesn't like it when it has particles in it and soft because that just ruins the whole eating experience. Okay. So anyway, after that first study, I'm like, okay, I think there's something here. And we did another ground beef study where we selected across the four mouth behaviors. But this time we used, instead of letting them choose what was important, we kind of took all the information and decided that particle size, length of time to chew, and the particle size upon swallowing were things that they told us were important. And we served them different treatments of ground beef that differed in texture. And it just verified again that what was important to them was different. And we added in the second study some commercial fast food and middle value restaurant hamburgers or from College Station. So we'd ask them what their favorite ground beef patty was. And if you've ever been to College Station, everybody loves Coffee Bridge. I love Coffee Bridge. Okay. And some people like Freddy's and some people don't. And some people like Sonic and some people don't. And the same with McDonald's. So we went and purchased those. My graduate student and I were running to places to get them hot and bring it back for these people. And what was interesting is that the suckers and the smooshers, we didn't tell them what they were eating, but we served the patties. They could put whatever they wanted to on a bun with whatever they prepared it with whatever condiments they usually put on it. They all went, this is Freddy's. Oh no, I don't like Freddy's. Crunchers, Freddy's. Crunches, right? It's a smash burger. There are times I do Freddy's. I'll go get a Freddy's, right? They didn't like it because it didn't break down and they couldn't manipulate it in their mouth. Yeah. So then we, after all of that, it was so fun. I mean, some people love McDonald's, some people hate it, and it went across mouth behavior types. And then we did steaks, and then we did pork chops because we wanted to go the whole muscle. And those principles held up. And in each of those studies, we presented different cooking methods that created differences in texture. Like we did a sous vide and versus just a grill versus a tenderloin versus a top butt. And we even, and they responded the same as they did the ground beef within category. And so the other thing that Jennifer originally told us is that the texture isn't always related to drivers of liking in consumer studies, because we talk so much about flavor, and flavor is so important. They only talk about texture if it's really broken. And really, until you talk to them, they don't know what they do in their mouth. And when I watched these people, because we did a random selection and they had to characterize themselves, so we didn't have the same people across all 4 studies. There were a lot of people that said, "Oh, I'm not. Now I understand what I do," and that's crazy.
Yeah. Well, and if it's second nature to us, if that's what we have always experienced, then yeah, we wouldn't know that we're maybe manipulating it differently.
Right. And that really came home to roost for me, because in the middle of this process, I had oral mouth surgery where I couldn't use, it hurt to use my molars.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to become a smusher. And let me tell you, I was not happy. Yeah. And they've actually done work with children all the way through adults. And once well, let me back up. You are what you're going to be even as a baby.
Okay, sure.
And that you don't really change mouth behaviors. But the other interesting thing is that chewers, which is what I am, we are the most tolerant. So, they also studied food rejection. All right. So, and Jennifer will tell you, she's always like, it isn't, it's not, it's also what they like, but what they really reject. So smushers and suckers, if they don't meet their texture requirements, they have a higher rejection rate. Yeah. So I can't remember the percentages right now. I have it on a slide, and then crunchers are next, and chewers will accept a lot of things, and they have the lowest rejection rates, because a lot, and Jennifer will talks about this. Chewers sometimes are conflicted.
But it also sounds like chewers might be more of a chameleon. Like they're more, like you said, you're more accepting of different textures.
That's right, because there's some. So my favorite candy is gummy bears.
Okay, yeah, it makes sense. Sure.
Yeah, because I like to chew them, but sometimes I suck them.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I may or may not chew them in the end. When suckers just don't understand that. Why don't you just suck it till it's gone?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you need a little bit of chewing.
Yeah. You like the response, the activity,
Right.
whereas the suckers, which made a lot of sense when you mentioned they prefer the juiciness side of things, which is also going to help deliver the flavor. But it seems as if they're ones that are willing to take the time to sit and ponder what they're experiencing and allow for it to almost dissolve, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And they are the slowest eaters. There's somebody that's a really slow eater. And I should have picked up on this. If I would have known it when my kids were little, I would have known that my daughter was a smoosher, right? She, at least, which is, she eats a little faster than Crystal, but but it's always like, are you going to eat that or what? It needs some time. Yeah. So the thing that we don't do as a meat industry is we don't merchandise to different mouth behavior types. Even though texture is, we've improved tenderness a lot in the last 30 years, but we don't really help people who, now keep in mind, they don't always know what they want, but there are certain tag words that they will that are more attracted to them. And the best thing is go to the granola aisle at the grocery store. There are chewy, there are crunchy. And most of the suckers and smooshers aren't buying granola bars.
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, would you say, or maybe have you investigated, I guess you have, you mentioned sous vide. I'm just thinking of different culinary styles and preparations are likely to influence even if we're serving the same item. And you mentioned the hamburger, the ground beef. That makes a lot of sense. I'm trying to think of the last time, how I prepared a steak, and I like a really nice sear so I can get that crust, because apparently I'm a cruncher, and we've concluded that, which is awesome. Yeah, I love the crust, especially like if you have like a smoked brisket. I'm eating the ends. I love that crunchy kind of almost burnt stuff on the outside. And then you have the ones that really would prepare more of that softer, but maybe more of a rare kind of steak. And honestly, I mean, I can appreciate a rare steak. I'm kind of a medium kind of guy, to be honest. I like the additional flavor that comes from it. But yeah, different culinary preparation seems to maybe cater to particular different mouth behavior types.
Yes, I think exactly right. And so we've done some work with sous vide. I think a lot of people worked with sous vide, and we added sous vide to this. I just want you to know that our loin that we used to cut our steaks from must have been initially pretty tough, because in the other work that we've done, we've gotten a very soft, juicy, and that's usually what sous vide is, right? And that work, that was Anderson Cabral's dissertation work funded by the Beef Checkoff. What was fun about that is we did sous vide plus grilling, and only grilling, and we looked at the texture. And as we were flavor, we're mainly looking at flavor, but I have to do texture too. And the softness and the muscle fiber definition was different. Now, one of the things that I've done now, thinking about mouth behavior, and I really am working on the revision of the sensory guidelines.
Yeah.
Yeah. And some of the work that we've done since, I've added some attributes to whole muscle
Okay.
that relate to definition of the fibers, because those, and then the particle size prior to swallowing, because we found out that's really important to people, how it breaks down into parts, so that as you chew or you suck, whether it feels like it's, the muscle fibers are there, or whether it's like Spam that you smush it and everything, and there's, Spam is good for Spam. We use that as our reference of non-muscle fiber definition.
Sure. Yeah. Homogeneous. Yeah.
And we there's different preferences for those.
Sure.
Yeah. And so I think one of the things that I found interesting in all this, so I can add some of those attributes. I love talking to the consumers. Jennifer is an expert. We call these workshops, not focus groups. We have them in there for 3 hours, and she'd keep longer if we could get them to stay, but that's about all.
That's pretty long. Yeah.
But to try to connect the kind of the mouth behavior type with what words on the meat package that relate to cooking,
Yeah.
how that relates to their emotions. And because my hypothesis, because I haven't tested it, I'm trying to test it. My hypothesis is that those crunchers are like you. They want grilling. You know, they want grilling, and they may
Or a
have,
crust of some sort.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And once in a while, as a chewer, I want you to know I have to go to burnt ends. I need the burnt ends, right? But I don't get them every time. And then on the smushers and the suckers, how they respond to sous vide or to tenderloins cooked without as much searing, that type of thing. And be able to measure their emotions and then put in their words or ways that we as an industry can tag them, because they're not going to know if they're a cruncher or a chewer or a smusher or a sucker. Now they're going down the meat aisle going, what am I going to do for dinner tonight? What do I want? Oh. And if you're lucky, you don't have a family that's all four types. Yeah, I basically have a cruncher and my husband, my daughter is the smusher, and my son and I are chewers. So, yeah. But what would entice them and help them to select the meat product that would fit what they want, and how to get out of it what they want, knowing that that's most of that subliminal.
Wow. Well, so how do we do that? I guess that's the question.
Yeah, well, my solution, Phil, everybody listen to this knows that I am always after research dollars, right? Uh, so I have a colleague named Dr. Marco Palma, and he has a human behavior lab. And at RMC at Colorado State, we did a demonstration of what we could do with that. And we also did it at Texas A&M when RMC was up here. And it's a fascinating technology. You can do eye tracking. You can also measure emotions. So what we want to do is, Jennifer always comes down and runs the workshop, partly so she can get to Aggie Land. She hasn't really wanted to come down for football season this year, but maybe next year, right? Yeah, another stuff. But she comes down because she's the expert. She's done this for 30 years and she's so good at it. And we want to select people across the 4 behavior types, have her work with them to make sure that they respond the way that we think, giving them different products. And then we want to put them in front of the human behavior computer analysis and put some words and things, or some, I guess, phrases.
Sure. Yeah. Triggers. Yeah. Yeah.
Triggers, yes.
Yeah.
And see what triggers them to be positive. And Marco does that with lots of things like wine and
Ah,
bourbon and
yeah.
other
Things
things.
that go well with beef.
Yeah, things that go well with you. But I think our challenge is because so much of this is in the subconscious, so
Yeah.
people aren't aware of it.
Don't
And
even know we're doing it. Yeah.
right, and our decisions are driven by the subconscious. If we can measure emotions, we do have the ability to do galvanized skin responses, so that when they get excited, their heart rate increases and their surface temperature, their skin surface temperature increases. We also can put little electrodes on their brain to see what's firing, right? Those are, and we could do all those, but I think I'm wanting to start with the emotions.
Sure. Yep.
And see if we can see what drives them. And I'd actually talked to former students that work like for Walmart or companies like that about putting that kind of an instrumentation in the meat case, because they actually have a place that does that. Might be. I found out that's a little harder to do.
Well, yeah, a little tougher to get it past the review board, maybe. And then logistics. But hey, we can all dream. Absolutely. Wow, what a fascinating topic. And I want to recap real quick, for all the listeners out there. So you mentioned the 4 categories: the cruncher, the chewer, the smusher, and the sucker. I was making little notes here next to them. Cruncher is a quick bite, and pretty well defines what it is. Potato chip kind of guy. Chewer, is a chewer. Yeah, taffy maybe, or you know, gum, maybe a gum chewer. And then
Yes, a lot of them are gum chewers.
a
Yeah.
lot of gum chewers. Okay, yeah. Um, I have to watch out. My filling came out last time I had a piece of taffy, and so I'm definitely not a chewer fan in that regard. Uh, Smusher sounds like that's our tenderloin audience right there. That's somebody that wants to be able to move things around, but almost chew it with your tongue, I guess, right? Like just
Yeah.
kind of
Use
move it
your
around.
front teeth a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing. And the suckers really like the juiciness factor. And I like that you called that out because it is one that's very relevant to a lot of the listeners out there. If you're meat scientists, we know about juiciness, but then also our processors out there, you understand getting that juiciness factor. Would you say that you mentioned it's a spectrum, but is there one that kind of stands out more so than others in the human population you've encountered, or is it pretty evenly distributed across all the people you've worked with?
That's a really good question, Phil, because it isn't evenly distributed. Suckers are the lowest. They're about 8% of the population.
Okay.
Smushers are about 13% of the population. Chewers and crunchers make up the rest. And I think that there's a slightly higher chewer than cruncher. Jennifer has those percentages of the work that they have done. So it's really easy to get crunchers and chewers and hard to find those smushers and suckers.
Sure. Well, and that makes a lot of sense as to, I mean, look at there's entire aisles devoted to chips,
Yeah.
right? And look at the candy aisle. There's almost always going to be something that's either it's going to be crunchy or it's going to be chewy. But um and then our smushers and suckers just have to make do with the rest of it. But it seems as if they do though. In regard to, well, if it's a chewy thing, I'm just not going to chew it. I'm just going to let it sit there and see what happens.
That's exactly right. They start. Nobody chews. If you're a sucker, especially if you're a sucker, you don't chew a Starburst.
Oh
You know?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh
And
no, I got to get right in there, especially while it's still a little tart on the outside. And
yes, yeah. See, you are a classic cruncher. Uh, and the pictures, the Wall Street Journal did an article on this a few years ago, and they did some little comedy things of the four classes that Jennifer shared with us. And the sucker is a lady just walking around with a sucker in her tongue. Yeah, yeah. And they don't they know how many licks it takes to get to the Tootsie Roll center of a Tootsie Roll. Yeah, we had a whole discussion about that. I know.
that's funny. And for all the younger folks out there, you're gonna have to go and look up that old reference there. But
Yeah, that's
you're
right.
dating yourself now, Dr. Miller.
I know. Yeah, I am.
Hey, I think that's a great area to kind of maybe wrap things up as far as the topic at hand. But we always like to ask our guests, how did you get to where you are today? And tell us a little bit about your background. What got you into meat science?
Well, I'm a farm girl from northeastern Colorado, small rural area, uh, on a livestock operation and dryland wheat and alfalfa. And I went to Colorado State, was in 4-H, judged livestock, found the animal science department because we used to buy sheep from them. Was a student worker for the two meat scientists. This will really age me. Dave Kramer and Brad Berry, two wonderful men. And one of my good friends also worked in animal science, and she said, they're doing this meat judging team thing. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm sorry, livestock judgers. I judged livestock for 10 years. I didn't really want to judge it again. I'd frozen myself enough trying to look, you know. And so I said, oh, okay. She said, this will be kind of fun. And we went to Montford on a Saturday morning at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I walked in and I smelled, this is the old sawdust cooler. Those that are listening remember that. They'll bring back memories. And I smelled sawdust and cold meat. And it was kind of cold, but not too cold. And I went, I'm home. And I must be crazy because on Saturday mornings, I spend my Saturdays in the cooler. And then later, my senior year, when I judged, we judged on Friday nights until 2 or 3 in the morning. And just like all of you out there that started with meat judging, that was what I fell in love with. And then through that avenue, I went to grad school. I never wanted to go to grad school. I never thought about grad school. And my two best friends, Paul Clayton, some of you might remember Paul. We were on the same judging team in Clay Moran, and they said, Miller, go to grad school and we'll be together. So we walked into Rob Bowling's office. They said, Miller wants to tell you something. He went, what do you want? Because he always knew it was trouble when the three of us were together. I said, I want to go to grad school. Is that all? Of course. Put in your app. Get out of here. I'm busy. That won't work today, but it worked. And I got my master's, worked with a feeder grade study. I thought I wanted to ride horses, sort feeder cattle. Those are my two first loves. And then grade the carcasses afterwards. And I decided to go on for a PhD. Did Russell Cross said, come to Clay Center, get your degree from Colorado State, come to Clay Center. We have a days on feed, backgrounding, composition, tenderness study. Be your dissertation. I went there. It was great opportunity. Met a lot of people. And then I went back to Colorado State and taught horseback riding, English and Western equitation for a year.
Natural transition, yes.
Natural transition. Harold Tatum, I was his first PhD student. He's going, oh, my first PhD student's out teaching horseback riding. It was fun. And then I decided I really needed to do something with my degree. And I worked at Montfort for 4.5 years as director of research. I was the second PhD they ever hired. I researched at that point with an N of 1, me. And I got my PhD in industry. I loved it. I thought I was going there so that Billy Lloyd and Paul Clayton and I could work together. I never worked with them. I worked with these old crusty guys who'd grown up in the meat industry, some from Chicago, some from Kansas City, and they taught me a lot. And then I had the chance to go to A&M. And for me, all three of my major professors got their PhDs at A&M. And I was lucky they hired me, and my husband finished his PhD in animal nutrition, and they hired him. And we've been here ever since. And my research has changed a lot. You know, when I was 26, 27, if you would have told me I was doing research in this area, I would have laughed at you. You know, I want to be outside with the cattle. I want to go buy cattle. I want to ride a horse. And so I think that's, what you're doing now, like what I'm doing now in my career. I never knew I would do this, but boy, I'm having fun. And just like you, Bill, you left the industry and came back to academics. And I did that because I love students and love to teach and wanted some independence.
Well, and I'm grateful for my time in industry with certified Angus beef, and I tell people often, just like you just said, that was the real learning. That there's no question that my instructors, especially Dr. Belk, instilled some incredible amount of knowledge into my career and everything. But once you're out there in the trenches, in the fire, man, some real learning happens, and quick too. There's not a lot of time to sit and ponder. You just learn and you move on and make decisions. And I'm grateful for it. I hope I'm a better instructor as a result. I know that the world is grateful for you going to graduate school so that you can be a part of contributing to the body of knowledge, especially within the sensory side of things. And gosh, this has been a pleasure having you on MeatsPad today.
Well, it's been fun, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk, Phil. And I appreciate you doing these programs and bringing different people in. I think it shows the strength of our industry and our association. So thank you.
Sure thing. Oh gosh, it's absolutely a pleasure. And I have to confess one thing. As we were visiting, I just recalled we did have an Aggie on before, Dr. Wes Osborne, and so I would be remiss to mention that because if he's listening, he's probably scratching his head saying, "Did I do that?" or So, but a colleague of yours as well. So yeah, yeah.
He's
Uh,
doing some fun stuff.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Great things happening down there. And you know what? Hopefully, I get down to the country of Texas at some time in the near future because it's always a
Well,
pleasure.
we always tell people our meat science program is stronger than our football right now.
Well, yeah, no, that's pretty cool. Dr. Miller, thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll catch up again in the future.
Okay, thank you very much, Phil. Thank you again.